All right. So with that, I'm going to invite our first panel up. And while they're coming up, one of the questions I get a lot is, what's one of your favorite projects that your company has done? And projects, and kind of like our children, right? We don't have any favorites. We love them all equally for different ways. But it's projects like this that have been really special to me. We've been involved in some projects in Alaska, been working on projects in tribal lands and things like that. And so projects where it's more than just putting solar up on a roof and pushing electrons into the grid, which obviously is important and good stuff, but providing real change or real something meaningful systems is something I hold near and dear, and so I'm really glad to see us do that. So with that, I'm going to kind of kick off our panel, if I can find my notes. Where did I put those? I just want to thank everybody for joining us. And so I'm going to just go down the line and allow you all to introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of get into the topic. So Lindsay Baer from Spark Northwest, project manager. You can tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Spark.
Yeah, nice to meet everyone. My name is Lindsay Baer. I work with Spark Northwest, as you just heard. My role primarily at Spark is to work with communities that can be like tribal communities, end of transmission, remote, islanded communities, to kind of go in and say, like, what does your community want to experience when it comes to energy systems, and how do they interact with them? So it can be technical assistance, it could be education, and so my background, I actually got to work as a project manager for residential and commercial systems for about 5 years. So I come in kind of saying, hey, I've actually seen these installations happen, and this is what it's going to look like for you. And like, how do you educate that to your community and find out like what they would want out of it? So Spark Northwest has been around for about 20 years, 25 years maybe, in the Seattle area, and we help underserved, underrepresented communities be part of the energy transition. And that can be working with municipalities on Douglas heat pump programs. It could be doing education events for tribal communities on Energy 101, mock solar installations. So yeah, I'll pass it to Kate.
Thank you. I'm Kate Pedersen. I'm the Energy Resilience Technical Assistance Program Manager at the Washington State Department of Commerce. I run and manage the Energy Resilience Technical Assistance Program, where we work with communities across the state to really define what energy resilience means to them, what they need out of systems to meet their community resilience goals. I help them figure out what they need out of that system, find a system that matches what their needs are, match them with funding, and help them apply to grants. I'm a professionally trained emergency manager. I approach all of my work with that mindset. I'm really here to help communities get through that darkest day that we all may face someday in our life. And the Energy Resilience Technical Assistance Program has been around for about 3 years. We are currently serving 95 communities across the state, and we have helped communities bring in just over $30 million in the last 3 years.
I have my own mic. And I'm Marcus Vierta. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Cascadia Renewables and Sulis Energy, and had the joy of working with Mayfield Renewables as the engineer of record for the Orcas Center project, which you just saw. Cascadia is a provider of development services. Our mission is to support the adoption and ownership of resilient assets by communities, in communities and for communities. So we work closely with Spark and Commerce to enable kind of an equitable transition, and it's been a really great joy to be doing that here in Washington State.
Great, thanks all. So today we're going to spend a little time here talking about community considerations for microgrid enablement. And for this conversation, we're really focusing in on these community projects that are community-owned microgrids for resilience. For those of you maybe not from the Pacific Northwest, we are overdue for a large earthquake event, and so that's a big driving force for a lot of these resilience projects that we're seeing. and Oregon and Washington specifically, statewide, have done some funding to help make sure that folks are ready and able to survive the 2+ weeks of power outages that we're expecting to see. So, I mean, that's not the only reason why we're seeing these, but I think that's a big part of what everybody on stage is seeing. And so just kind of keeping that in mind when we're doing this. But wanting to talk about the community aspect, and the folks on the stage are very involved in their communities and getting these projects. So I want to kick it off, and Lindsay, I'm going to ask you first. So the question is, why is community buy-in important, and what does community buy-in mean from your perspective?
Well, I mean, community buy-in is important because it is really what can make or break a project. And I think the important thing is when you go into a community, you're not only trying to give them something, but you should go in thinking, I'm trying to take something from them, which might sound a little strange because you think these communities are probably at need, there may be end of transmission line, but when you go into a community and you accept that, you have something to educate them on, they have something to educate you on, you end up creating a system that works for their community. These people are reaching out to you to say, hey, we need something, but they know a lot about what they need. It's your job to go in and say, how do I pull it out of you? How do I connect with your community in a way to understand if you had an energy resilience system, how would they interact with it? And that helps you create a system that works for this community. I think something that comes up a lot at Spark, we have a lot of people who've worked in different states, they've worked with a lot of different tribal communities, and one thing a lot of them say is, once you've worked with one tribal community, you've worked with one tribal community. It goes a long way, and the same thing with like a port community. Once you've worked with one, that's the only one you've worked with. You have to go in with open ears, open eyes, say, who are you? How would you use this? And create a system that works for them.
It's always hard to follow Lindsay. So, no, I think that one of the biggest things is if we're here talking about resilience, there's a very big difference between resilience and reliability. And there's a need for economic growth in the renewable energy field, but we're here to help improve community resilience. And ultimately, the community is the one that's going to have to be able to use this system. They're going to have to know what it does, what it doesn't do, because if you're a developer, you're going into a community, you put this system in, and then you leave. And then if it doesn't do what they want it to do or what they think it's going to do, then there's potential life safety concerns in this situation. And so you have to really, one, listen to the community, like Lindsay said, but also educate the community on what these systems do and do not do, so that they have a realistic expectation, because you can't expect someone to open a manual and learn how to use a microgrid the day the earthquake happens. That's not how it works. They need to have practiced it. They need to have, really tried these things out so that they're ready when it happens. And I agree with Lindsay. Every community is unique. Every different community is going to have a different definition of what energy resilience means to them, because the makeup of their community is different and the needs of their community is different. I work with a number of tribes. We have tribes that their definition of energy resilience is 2 months of autonomy on the coast, because the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake is going to take power out to them for 2 months. And then we have others that they live closer, they're in more urban areas or whatever, and their resilience definition is 2 days. And that's a very different microgrid that you're putting in when you're looking at those two different needs.
Yeah, I think I've learned so much from these two on this topic, and I think from the kind of cynical industry side, it sure makes our job a lot easier when you start by listening to a community and really understanding the goals of that community and then reflecting them back through, especially when we're developing microgrids for resilience. You all who've done those optimizations know how dynamic best sizing and microgrid optimization and dispatch analyses can be. And when we root those decisions we're making on the system's capacity in the goals of the community, it makes our instructions a whole lot easier to do that job. So starting by listening is the least you should do. I'm sure you are like me in that you've listened to weeks of Jigger Shaw talking on podcasts at 2x speed. He's been saying lately, how important it is that we're thinking about communities in this transition and reflecting the value of the work we do to that community. It's not lost on us that right now in this country, we're seeing a pushback on the goodwill to our industry. And there's like 15%, I think, AHJs have a moratorium on solar or BESS of some kind, and that's growing. So we really have to think about how are we representing communities when we're developing projects, and how are we listening to them if we're going to be successful to do what we need to do to provide that kind of resilience to communities.
First off, Marcus, I think you might be in the minority on listening to Jigger Shaw at 2x on a regular basis, but I love the enthusiasm. We as a company, as I mentioned, we're here on our retreat, and we actually went up and saw some of the projects that we were doing engineer of record for up in the Swiminish tribe. And on our way out there, so I'm not trying not to throw anybody on the bus here, but on our way up there, I actually saw a yard sign, no BESS, no lithium in my backyard, or something to that effect. And so I know that there's been some stuff here locally. So I guess I would just like to kind of pose that question to the group, and Marcus, maybe you want to start. What did that look like? Kind of how did that happen? And so just a little background, as far as I know, there was a relatively large BESS project that was being proposed, but the community got wind of it and said, no, we don't want this, with or without some good information. So I think this is part of the community buy-in and understanding, and so just kind of your perspective on that. Absolutely. I think, so we're not going to name names, but there's roughly 200 megawatt project that was proposed in Skagit County, and with very little to no community engagement that was done. The developer went through the state kind of AHJ approval process, and the site where they were proposing this BESS was, a particularly constrained component of the grid. So it made a lot of sense to put a BESS there. It's also alongside a river that has, a tribal nation that operates there in agricultural land. So they hit bingo pretty quick on the risks to not doing proper community engagement. We've been developing these resilience hub projects in that area, and feeling that pushback from the community. And what I wish had happened was that developer reached out to a Spark Northwest and done some capacity building in the community. Because when you're there talking to the community members, they have real legitimate concerns about safety, about environmental impacts, and about agricultural lands and tribal lands. And you have to stare those concerns in the face and validate them and understand where they're rooted in order to optimize a project's kind of capacity and optimize a project's development life cycle. So at the end of the day, we're now playing that role, that capacity building role, and listening to the community and helping educate them on the role that these microgrids can play for grid reliability and flexibility, as well as community resilience. So that's why I brought Jigger up. He's been really clear that it's our job to do that. And if we don't do that, we're going to continue to lose the good faith that we've had. And it's going to make our jobs quite a bit harder. I know in Skagit County alone, there's already 3 BESS moratoriums that have passed since that project was first proposed. So if we don't do that work, these projects won't be built.
So I get requests from communities, and I can tell you in the last month, I've gotten 5 counties asking about BESS safety. So that's just in the last month. And we are standing up an energy safety program within our office, trying to get ahead of this. But the problem is that it is much easier to find terrifying videos of battery fires gone wrong than it is to find digestible, easily accessible facts on battery safety. And So you have to get ahead because the fear is real, and as soon as the fear is set in, it's so much harder to bring it back. And so it's our responsibility to bring in facts, to talk about the fear. I mean, I went to a battery safety symposium 2 years ago. It took them 2 days to actually talk about the risks. All we did was watch video after video after video of horrible BESS events. And it's a room full of first responders, and they're the ones that are really at risk. And I felt like I was a drug pusher in a room full of cops, because all I do is push out batteries, you know? But it took them 2 days to actually address the realistic safety concerns. And that's not how the conversation should be going. We have to get ahead of it. And it's not even just BESS. There were 2 projects in the state that were just put on hold by the governor because there was improper community engagement. And one of them was a solar project. And so it's not just BESS. We have to get ahead of, the communities will stop your projects if they want to.
At Spark, we have a saying called moving at the speed of trust, which I know I worked 5 years construction is not what you want to hear, but it's really about moving at that speed of trust, starting with education and insight and helping the community understand. And then it's coming, you're partnering with them to educate their community in a way that they are receptive and that speaks to them. And without that, this is what can happen, is then you're trying to come after the fact and say, oh, no, it's safe. And, they already know that you have something to gain out of this. So if you come at it early and say, hey, we want to help you, but we want to make sure you understand, and this is why we're here, they're going to be a lot more receptive to trusting you and understanding that you are trying to help their community. So, yeah.
And I think along those lines, in some of our prep calls, Kate, you had the story that I'm actually starting to steal now, so thank you very much for that. Talking about that community engagement and for these resilient systems, placing them where they should be. And one of the things you use the story of, put it at Joe's Crab Shack instead of at the community center, because nobody goes to community center, everybody goes to Joe's. And so, I guess my question there is, how do you engage with folks? How do you get to know where people are congregating? How can they best use those, like Lindsay was just saying, where they can trust to go and utilize these services?
So absolutely, you ask them, where do you go? Where do you trust? But a good example is one of the very first communities that we worked with was a small town. The guy who was running for mayor was the city administrator, came to us and he's like, I want to put a system at our admin building. It's like, okay, sure, whatever. Why don't we ask your community? We'll come down, we'll run a meeting. So we went in, we talked about what energy resilience was. We asked the community, where would you want to put these systems? And they gave us 15 different buildings. The admin building was not one of them. And ultimately, they voted as a community to put a system at their food bank, because what was most important to them was to ensure that their community could receive food and that they did not lose large amounts of refrigerated food when power outages happened. So sometimes it just takes one meeting and you just ask them, where do they go? But something I actually learned just 2 weeks ago at another workshop was sometimes it's even just the wording around how you did it. We had community centers that were talking about energy resilience. We had emergency managers in the room. Emergency managers talk about shelters. Well, shelters have a different connotation to a lot of people. They think of shelters for people experiencing homelessness or things like that. So why don't we rename what we're talking about so people know that that's a gathering space for, in an emergency, maybe resilience hub or something like that. So you have to, but the emergency managers, the look on their face was like, oh my gosh, why wouldn't we call them shelters? We always call them shelters. It's because times change and words change. And so and the only way you learn that is by asking people.
Great, thank you. And I'm gonna keep it with you real quick, Kate. So I'm gonna kind of move us into what has worked well in Washington State. This is where the three of you are based, and you have very intimate knowledge of these programs. So I guess, can you walk us through what has worked well in Washington State, and how has your program specifically, Kate, I'll start with you, enabled the communities to have these successful projects?
Absolutely. And I mean, part of the success of the programs that we have in Washington State is because of the two people on this stage with me. We've actively worked with both Cascadia Renewables and Spark Northwest to build up the work that we do. But one of the things that one of the big things that helped Washington State is the funding came first, where we actually got thrown a ton of money from the legislature to put in solar and storage systems. And then we were like, oh crap, how do we do this? And we had to build a program really quickly. And then it was a ton of trial and error. So, I got hired to create this technical assistance program to run for this solar and storage program. And I brought in that emergency management mindset of how do we actually get these facilities where they need to be. But over the period of the about 18 months that I was working with communities, it wasn't until the end of that 18-month period that I actually felt like I was getting it right. And that was that education component, making sure the communities felt heard, making sure that they felt seen, and giving them the knowledge that they could engage with technical experts in a way that they could get what they wanted. But funding helps, but then also it was working with partners who have been doing this work, engaging with solar, the solar industry, and then bringing in, that background of emergency management really helped. Does that fully answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Lindsay, I guess I would pose the same question to you, and just kind of how are you, how's your organization helping with the success of these projects?
Yeah, I think one of the things that comes up a lot for communities in this area is like a sense of duality. You're coming in and you're trying to be really innovative and you're trying to make changes in this community, but you have to remember you're also, trying to preserve the culture of the community, why people want to stay, what it means. And I think, Spark Northwest comes in and tries to say, how do we blend the two of those? How do we create an energy vision for your community that speaks to both sides of your communities? It speaks to the elders who have been there for a long time and who want to preserve the space that they're in, but it speaks to the youth that want to stay at their community but need innovation and reasons to stick around. And I think these microgrid projects are a great opportunity for that. They're keeping people there, but they're also creating new jobs, new programs, systems to be part of. So I think for Spark Northwest, when we go in and we actually say, hey, we're going to show up and we're going to put on an event and we're going to open it up to your whole community. And I know microgrids seem complicated. I know energy seems complicated, but you'd be surprised at how many elders, show up to these education events. You might think, oh, this is too technical. They're not interested. No, they want to connect with their grandkids. They want to understand what's happening in their community. They want to be a part of it, and they show up and they listen. They show up multiple days. They come to the mock roof installations, even if they maybe can't do all the work. So I think it's just, making sure you make space for everyone in the community, educate the youth, show up to the community events, go to the community dinner, and that helps you just understand where the crab shack is.
And Marcus, I'm going to throw a little bit of a twist on it for you, because as a developer, as a contractor, Mayfield and Cascadia, we work well together, and I think that we have a lot of similar ideals and visions on working with these projects. But you're then at the tail end of the project. You want to get it in. You need to have it installed and working. And so I'm just curious on what your approach has been, which is probably different than a lot of developers and a lot of contractors, because that front end work takes a lot. And it's not something that you're necessarily getting paid for. And so I guess I'm just curious on your perspective, how you've approached that, working with Kate, working with Lindsay on these projects for that success.
I have a question for you all. Raise of hands, have you ever read a comprehensive emergency management plan? That's more than I thought it would be. It starts there. It starts by doing your homework, right? And there's no shortcut to developing these projects in a way that's representative of the community. We look at 4 aspects when we show up to a community for the first time. What does their emergency management plan say? Who's their serving utility? What are the ISO or the utilities kind of IRP or grid constraints for the area? Third, what's the comp growth plan in that area? How are they growing? How's population changing? What's their school looking like? How's that growing or changing? And then fourth, what's climate doing to this area that's changing all of that? what's the chaotic impact of climate change for that region. You show up having read those public reports, and you can now start to say to a community, hey, I read this in your report. Is that reflective? Is that your actual experience, or is that wrong? And the defense comes down, and you can now start to have a more productive conversation. And I can tell you, we're in lockstep with Mayfield that feasibility is the critical roadmap to doing that cost effectively and representative for the community. If you don't do thoughtful feasibility, you will pay more as a contractor on the construction side because there will be risks that you didn't anticipate. So creating that roadmap is the path towards representative and cost control.
Great, thank you for that, and thank you for mentioning the feasibility. That is definitely something that we hold near and dear, and it's something that we very much want to see, and it's because of that success of the program. So we're getting close to the end of our time, but I did want to give you all just at least one more opportunity to, for the folks in the audience, kind of key takeaway on what you would want people to walk away with in this community engagement. What can they put into action in order to have these successful projects? And Marcus is trying to make Kate go first.
I don't want to go first.
Okay, fine. Do your homework and do feasibility, but start by listening, and it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. Yes, you're front-loading some costs, but I promise you the project will be more successful, and you will save that in spades on the back end.
I purposely sit in the middle so I don't have to go first. So, no, I think first, listen more, talk less, ask lots of questions, but also I had a thought and it totally just went out my head. It might be gone. Yeah, maybe it might come back, we'll see.
We're all friends here, it's okay. I think the biggest thing is show up early. Don't feel rushed that I know people feel like the money's gonna run out, the deadline's here, but actually show up. Make time for the community meetings, make time to get to know the people, build on the events they already have, and really feel like you're taking, I know it sounds crazy, but take something from every community you go into. You have something to learn from them. They're going to teach you, potentially some new way to design your project, that each one is different. So, go into the community, learn from them, listen to them, laugh with them. That's a big thing. I know this is serious work, but if you don't laugh with the people that you're with, if you don't humble it down to, this is a community, we're trying to be a part of it, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be good.
I remembered.
Yay.
Yes. No, community engagement it's scary, but it doesn't have to be. But also keep in mind that people whose job is to do community engagement, they get nervous doing it. Every community is different. It can be hard, but it's worth it, because the other thing you can do is, say you've got a multi-million-dollar project, adding $10,000 on to hire someone to do community engagement for you may be worth it so that your project doesn't get killed by the community. It's a small cost, and you can hire people, or you can partner with people who do this day in and day out to help your project be successful. So again, not only are you benefiting the community because you're educating them and you're, things like that, but you're more likely to have a successful project as well, because it really sucks to put a ton of time and effort into a project, multi-million-dollar project, that then gets written off by the governor, or moratoriums get put in place, because that's the reality of what can happen. But just know, community engagement, it doesn't have to be hard, it doesn't have to be scary, but if it is scary for you, just find someone whose job it is to do that, and they'll go in and talk to people.
Beautiful. Thank you all very much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time before this, today, coming to our event, and yeah, very helpful. If folks have questions, I know Marcus will be around. I don't know if Kate and Lindsay are going to stick around, but please find us. Love to engage with you. We do have those breaks scheduled in. So thank you all very much. I appreciate your time. Yes.